the dividing line from a resident and a citizen, what is it now? It used to be monumental. It was, you can't hold an office unless you're a citizen. I think that's been under attack. I can't vote unless you can vote in some board elections in Massachusetts and California if you're not a citizen. You cannot qualify for entitlements, that's gone. Only a citizen has the permission to leave his country and come back at will. But now it's just the opposite. I come into SFO and I don't have a passport. I go into a little room and I'm in trouble. I go fly into Mexico City and I cross the border, I can do it with impunity. So those barriers or divides, or whatever term we use, have dissipated. They no longer exist.
Today, only a little more than half the world's 7 billion people, I'm quoting from The Dying Citizen, are citizens of fully consensual governments enjoying constitutionally protected freedoms. They're almost all Western. These realities explain why millions from North Africa risk drowning in the Mediterranean to reach Europe, and why millions more uproot from Mexico and Latin America to cross the southern border of the United States. Close quote. Here's the question that raises right away. Is citizenship coincidental, or is it central to the way of functioning that sets the Western world apart? Do you see what I'm saying?
I do.
If a Mexican, let's say a Mexican from some poor mountain town in Oaxaca, what he wants is a better life for himself and his family. He's drawn to the economic engine of the United States. Citizenship is incidental in his mind, but is it incidental to the American project itself?
Well, citizenship is a synonym for a constitutional republic, and it's very rare. It's fragile. It doesn't exist in history very much. It's the aberration, and it's very difficult to make people pick their own leaders, audit them, vote on issues of revenue and taxation, etc. So most people outsource that to monarchs or tyrants or somebody else. But this idea that you're an independent, autonomous, middle-class citizen is very rare. And when you talk to people who come from Mexico, and I do a lot, they say things that nobody would guess. They don't say, I just came here for better wages. There's a friend of mine, Raul, I won't give his last name, he said, I came up here because when I was in Oaxaca, no one ever called me senor. It was you or Raul. I came up here, the first thing I noticed when I went into the doctor's office in Selma, California, I'll just use the word Mendez. Mr. Raul Mendez, can I help you? In other words, a citizen, he thought he was a citizen, but people were given a modicum of respect. So we want to cherish that. And you cannot have citizenship, as I said in the book, unless you have a sacred space that inculcates traditions and customs.
Borders.
And those
sacred
borders have to
space
be
within borders.
Yeah, that's what, you go to Greece, wars were over borders because they thought that Thebes and Athens or Argos and Sparta, that they had to have that space, and they were very jealous of it because outside of the space, they didn't have the power, they didn't have the control, they didn't have the money to extend their citizenship. The idea was if you try to extend citizenship beyond your natural confines and you dilute it at the core, sort of like the British Empire,
right.
And then you're right at the core at London, you've got Dickens writing David Copperfield. It's rotten at the core.
Right. The population cannot exercise its rights without material security that only the economic self-reliance and autonomy of the middle class ensure, close quote. And you illustrate this point by talking about the democracy of ancient Greece, where only those with a certain degree of property, not the very rich, but they had to have some property, were permitted to participate in the assembly. Today, I'm continuing to quote you, today the modern suburban everyman is becoming a nostalgic ideal rather than a vibrant reality. Indeed, the middle class, the American middle class, has lost economic ground for nearly half a century. The country's gotten richer.
Yeah.
So you don't mean just, I mean, we all have iPhones that we didn't used to have. So what do you mean? What do you mean by this?
I'm saying that where we have these appurtenances and we can call Nigeria or Moscow, and we couldn't do that with $1 million 30 years ago. I understand that. But I'm talking about the ability to function within a society in an autonomous fashion. So if you're a young person, you get your sociology major, and what do? You have $50,000, $60,000, $80,000 in debt. $1.7 trillion in debt. And if you die in
student debt.
Yes, student debt. The average person dies with about a net worth of $10,000 and about $10,000 in credit card debt. So you're not creating people who are going to say to wealthy people, I want to be very careful that these very powerful, influential people do not leverage war, massage government action. I'm quoting almost Aristotle now. And you don't want people who are very impoverished to say to the government, I need a subsidy. So you've got these middle people that said, I don't need the government and I don't need wealthy people. I'm an independent person. I'm going to audit my elected officials. I'm going to speak out if I disagree with General Milley. If I don't like Anthony Fauci's policy, I'm going to say so. I'm not worried about the government retaliating to me. I'm not worried about a Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates. He can't hurt me. I'm an independent. And yet what do we have? It's what Tocqueville was brilliant in Democracy in America. He said that basically he forecast what would happen when you had an entitlement state. You'd have a prolonged adolescence. So what are we doing now? If you look at the first age of marriage, 23 to 29, first child, got 26 to 30.
Over what period of time? Over the last
Over
20
about
years?
50 years. 50
Okay.
years.
All right.
And
Sorry.
then buying a house, we were making progress. 63%, it's going down, and the age is going up. And so we're having these people, I guess Obama knew something that we didn't when he had the pajama boy commercial and The Life of Julia, that we were creating dependent people upon government or the largesse of wealthy people.
An infantilized population.
It was very
whether it has
valuable
cell
for-
phones or not does
Yeah.
not make for citizens.
They're not independent. And just to finish on the middle class, I was very lucky that I was a classic student because that's central, the mesoi, are central to the experience of civic government and consensual government.
States must privilege citizens over mere residents, and citizens must live within established borders sharing, here's that marvelous phrase of yours again, must live within established borders sharing a sacred physical space, close quote. The trouble today, again the dying citizen, we now live in an increasingly borderless world, close quote. Borderless, I get the borderless because you turn on the television and you can see streams of people from the South not being, I don't know what the word, well, there's streaming
2 million
across,
this physical year.
right, streaming across the southern border, but you mean more than that.
What we were saying is that the communications eroded time and space. So you could go somewhere or you could speak somewhere and there was a uniformity of culture, I get that. But in reaction to that, the physical borders in Europe, but especially in the United States southern border and places in Asia started to collapse. And people got angry because the first thing they discovered is when people migrated across, usually for economic reasons, and they did so en masse, often under illegal auspices, often without capital or skills, then they became wards of the state. And they added to the subsidies that were required to give them parity when we're enlightened societies, and the taxes burden on the middle class, and wages fell, that were on the middle class wages fell, and crime arose. It's just a fact. And more importantly, when you meet somebody at the barber shop, and you meet somebody, you know, at the hospital, emergency room, and they're not a citizen, and they're not here legally, or they're not even a legal resident, what do you have in common, other than your basic humanity? You say, what did you think of 4th of July this weekend? Who's your favorite president? Are you going to be a Little League coach? And there's a foreignness there. And it's okay if it's a small minority of the population. But when you have 40 to 50 million people that were not born in the United States, some of them are legal residents. Some of them have been naturalized. A lot haven't. Or 27% of the state of California were not born in the United States. Again, some legal residents. Some,
Right.
Then you're encountering too many people that don't have the common shared civic reinforcement. And so when you ask them, what do you think of the Electoral College? Or what do you think of getting rid of the 9-person Supreme Court? Or what do you think of outlawing gas lawnmowers in California? Or do you like the 99 being the most dangerous highway in the United States in California? You're met with a blank stare. I don't know anything. Ask me a question about Oaxaca and I can tell you.
Right.
So and when you add it finally, Peter, to the host, we're the host, and we used to say, you chose to come in. We didn't ask you. You chose to have a different paradigm from where you left. And we're going to have a brutal bargain. You're going to assimilate you. We're going to integrate you. We're going to intermarry. We're going to make you a perfect American. And if you do this, you have just as much right as somebody who came across on the Mayflower, as Teddy Roosevelt said. 7 generations mean nothing. You are the equal to the daughters of the Revolution.
Right. Right.
And now we say, you know, who are we to judge? Who are we to say that our system is better than theirs? Hello, they left. They're theirs. They forsake it. They're here.
The dying citizen, quote, All citizens should give up their own ethnic, racial, and tribal primary identities. Only through such a brutal bargain of assimilation. You come here, you learn English, you learn the way our government works. Correct? That's the kind of assimilation you mean. Only through such a brutal bargain of assimilation can they sustain a common culture. What's wrong today? Again, the dying citizen. Until the late 20th century, the United States suffered only sporadic episodes of blood and soil exclusivity, and instead, usually through intermarriage and assimilation, made the idea of racial or ethnic purity inert. Now the nation is threatening to go tribal. Once a man owes more loyalty to his first cousin than to a fellow citizen, a constitutional republic cannot exist. Close quote. Explain that.
Well, there's been first of all, there's been very few multiracial societies of any sort in history. The natural bird of a feather flock together is the norm,
Right.
as Socrates said. Okay, so when you have a multiracial country and people are naturally tribal, you can use coercion like the Soviet Union did, or the Ottoman Empire, or the Roman Empire. Or you can try to be a democratic consensual country. Or you can do like the Yugoslavia. Remember how that worked out? Or Rwanda? Or you can be consensual like India and Brazil. It doesn't work out that great. We're the only one that's trying it. If you, Peter Robinson, says, I love Japan, it's an ally, I want to be a Japanese citizen and rise high and be a political pundit on Japanese TV and run for office, zero chance. If I say, I love Mexican people, I do, and I love Mexico, I'm going to go down and be a Mexican citizen and someday be president, zero chance.
Gringo forever.
Zero. Okay, so this was a unique experiment. Nobody seems to appreciate that. And Martin Luther King Jr. told us that the content of our character was more important than the color of our skin. So here we are, 50 years after the Civil Rights Movement, and we're re-tribalizing with complete ignorance of where that trajectory leads in history. It leads to blood and soil violence. It leads to incompetency. It leads to the destruction of meritocracy.
The dying citizen. You cite the widespread belief among elites, quote, that Americans are becoming citizens of the world. An ancient,
A good word in Greek.
an ancient but unworkable idea of cosmopolitanism has reemerged. Close quote.
What's happened in the last 30 years, what you talk about, the global inclusivity of cell phones and dish TV, jet travel, has been confused that because we all wear tie-dye t-shirts and flip-flops and jeans, whatever country we're in, or we say, okay, man, or the F word, or you can go to Argentina, or you can go to Taiwan and hear rap music. We're all in the brotherhood of man. We're not. As I said, 190 nations, as you read, less than half of them are consensual. So if you confuse this harmony that's a veneer, this similarity, and with something existential.
It's only similarity.
It's only a similarity. And so, and I'll give you an example. Where it leads to is Secretary of State Blinken asking the United Nations to investigate whether the United States is racist or not. So basically he's telling Americans, I trust an ecumenical body of nations, 60% of whom are not consensual, and they include China that has 1.4 people in camps. And they may have political reasons to find us racist, but we're going to abide by their recommendations, or the Criminal Court, or the Paris Climate Accord. It was summed up by Klaus Schwab, the architect of Davos. Remember him?
Right.
Good old Klaus Schwab. I've read some of his books. And he wrote a book, The Great Reset. And if we could just get all of the elites together, a Bill Gates on one side of the table, a John Kerry, and we can get them all here, and then we can decide that there should be an international tax code, which they're going to decide. They did. And then get rid of that Ireland undercutting everybody to get investment, and we're going to get together, we'll have diversity, we'll set quotas for diversity. We're going to run things. It's just like right out of frightening Plato's Republic with these guardians, they're superior people, and they're going to talk down to people, the elite.